Hello, hi, welcome back to part 2 of our videos. It's Nat and Claire here from Educational Psychology, and today we're going to talk about thriving in transition.
Okay, so in our last video, we talked about the effects of stress and trauma on our brain, and that it is not about what's wrong with us or what's wrong with you, but it's about what's happening to us or happening to you. And that's because this is an abnormal situation.
And we also talked about the fact that essentially our brains are survival brains first before they are thinking brains. So at times of heightened stress and trauma, we can flip our lids.
And we followed that by explaining how we all have a window of tolerance, which is normally quite broad, and it's a time where we can think and feel and behave all at the same time. But sometimes, in times of stress, that window gets a bit narrower, so we find ourselves more often becoming very impulsive when we go up outside of the window, or very numb when we go down under the window.
So it's more important than ever to be kind to ourselves and each other.
We want to talk to you now about the sorts of things that might help us when we find ourselves either in the hyper-aroused, so very impulsive, or hypo-aroused, so quite numb and low mood. And we're going to take you back to what we said in the first video when we talked about how our survival brain was the first thing to develop, followed by the emotional brain or limbic brain, and then finally our thinking brain. And when it comes to stress and trauma, we need to first focus on regulation and managing that initial survival brain. So focusing on regulation first, this slide is quite helpful. Okay, so we need to regulate ourselves, or maybe we might need to help regulate those around us. And we need to calm ourselves down out of hyper or hypo arousal and return back into the window of tolerance. So that's our first job. Once we've managed to regulate enough, then the next thing that we need is to relate to others. So we need to be connected and supported in a attuned and sensitive way. And once those two things are in place, we'll find that we're able to reason again and function like we normally do.
So, as Claire has just said, because of the situation that we're in at the moment, we may find that our windows of tolerance are narrower than usual. So we can traverse into hyper and hypo-arousal more easily. Simple activities to decrease hyper-arousal are centred around ways to slow you back down. So reconnecting with the here and now by engaging your senses and purposely slowing down your actions. Simple activities to decrease hypo-arousal are around bringing you back up, reconnecting with the here and now by engaging with anything that stimulates your senses to get you back up into the window of tolerance.
We want to explain some more detailed, practical ways that we can manage ourselves when we get dysregulated. I'm going to share a poster with you, which I expect you've seen because I've seen it in many a staff room and office. It's quite helpful. It's called 50 Ways to Take a Break. And it's particularly useful if you think about the things on here through the lens of whether you're hypo or hyper aroused.
Yeah, so just thinking about being hyper aroused. When you, as we've just said, when you're hyper aroused, you speed up. Your thoughts are racing quicker. You might be moving. You might be agitated. So taking some ideas from here that will help to calm you, to bring you back down into the window of tolerance. Breath work is really important. This is particularly because when we breathe, we take in oxygen, and oxygen is what we need to break down the stress hormones that are raging through the brain at these times. You might also want to take some ideas from grounding work. So, for example, this is trying to get the senses back on board and into the here and now. So you would name 5 things of a certain colour in the room, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste, that kind of idea. Some people, in order to relax, need to actually do something physical, like running or walking. Other people are better to sit and meditate. Whatever it is that gives you the opportunity to calm. Heavy work can be really useful at these times, and also being near water or taking a nice warm bath, that kind of thing.
The things to do when you're hyper-aroused. That's when you're going to need some more activation. If you're just beginning to feel a little bit flat, then you might be in a state to want to call a friend, and that's usually going to make you feel more energized. If it's gone beyond that and you don't want to talk, then the sorts of things that can help are to go outside and enjoy nature, to get a bit of brisk walking going, just to activate you. Or it might be that you want to put on some dance music and dance around. It might take you back, that music, to a place where you had got lots of energy. Similarly, you could have some smells around the house that remind you of exciting times, that will perk you up a bit. Other things that help are the cold and feeling cold. So if you like swimming in cold water, that would be a great thing to do, or having a shower in cold water. Half of the year, just going outside will do it. Another thing that helps is to have the sun in your eyes. That can really stimulate you too.
So we've talked about some of the ways that we can help ourselves to regulate. We're now going to talk about how we can relate.
Yes, so it takes courage and practice to talk about issues and feelings. We need to feel safe, and safe enough to open up. And when somebody does open up, it's so important that we listen. Usually, when you want to say something important, it is good to signpost that you want somebody to listen. But how good is our conversation and our listening? So some of the things that we need to try and work on that are quite common for all of us are, firstly, that it is important to stay focused. It's so easy for us to have another conversation going on in our head or to be distracted by our environment. And we have to work really hard to stay focused on the person's story.
Yeah, and it can also be... We sometimes want to reassure people, don't we, that everything's going to be okay. But just by saying, oh, it's okay, don't worry, it'll all work out, and those kind of things, although we're trying to do that in a very positive way, it does dismiss what they're feeling at the time, and it doesn't help, because essentially it means that you're not listening to the level of distress that they're in.
Another thing that is very easy for us to fall into is to not listen because we think we found a solution and we're desperate to give them advice. And if we start giving advice, again, we can't be listening to their story and we haven't heard all of it yet. So avoid giving advice.
Yeah, and remain focused on the story and what's happening for them. It can also be really easy to hijack the story, to relate it to a time when something similar happened to you and how you felt and what you did in order to get through that. But again, that's not helpful. It's about what's the person is feeling and what's helpful to them. So don't hijack the story.
And finally, it's very easy to interrupt somebody's story. And that might be for reasons that are helpful, but if you cut someone off in their flow, then it's very hard for them to start again. So avoid interrupting when someone's talking. Okay, so our basic steps when listening are to give our full attention to the person who's talking and to listen. Then to reflect back what they've said. This can be sound a bit contrived, but it is helpful. So I would really urge you to try it. So you really just summarize what they've said and then ask them if there's anything else, because usually there is, because when they hear you've listened, it prompts them to think further. And finally, it's a time where you ask if there's any way you can help.
So we're going to show this listening in action now.
Hi Nat, I wonder if you've got time for a chat. I've got something on my mind at the moment.
Yeah, I've got some time now if you like, so the space is yours.
Oh, great, thanks. So, okay, so at the moment, I think you might know that I've got quite a house full. We've got lots of student-aged kids back, some of my own, and there's a couple of others who needed somewhere to stay. And that is full on, and headspace is tricky, but you know, I'm enjoying it and it's all manageable. But come Tuesday, they are all working healthcare and they've all been called back to work in the hospital. So suddenly my house is going to be emptied out, and I'm not sure how well I'm going to manage the space that brings.
So you're sort of thinking forward to the transition as you transition into a different normal, and you're sort of feeling the conflict of some of the things that will bring, but also some of what you'll lose, and that seems to be quite tricky to regulate.
Yeah, I think some of it is worry for them, and that they're not at home and safe. But I'm also aware that I don't do well with a lot of space often, or it's easy for me to get quite low. So I'm worried about how I'm going to manage that. Yeah,
so you've got so it's like a double whammy really. I'm sort of hearing you say that you're very worried about the children, what they're going back into, perhaps worried about how they'll be when they're not safe at home with you. And although you can see some benefits, you know, getting some headspace back, you're worried that when you're in that headspace, you know, the potential might be quite counterproductive and saddening as well.
Yeah. So I'm sort of, I don't know. Yeah, just aware and quite anxious about the change coming.
Yeah, I can see that you're feeling quite anxious. Is there anything else that you need me to know?
Just I suppose. I just need to make sure that I have enough in my routine to to make sure that I do get out, and also that I do connect with people, and connect with other people than the kids, because it's too much for them just to hear from me. So yeah, just wanting to put in a new normal really, and make sure that I don't just retreat.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're starting to think about ways forward, ways you might manage some of the difficulties that you'll potentially face. Is there anything that I can do to help in that?
Well, it would be good to check in with you once in a while. Yeah. And ask. I give you permission to ask how I'm doing. I'm going to try and start running again. So see how that's going. That would be good.
Yeah. So I'll check in with you. I'll make sure to ask specifically about what's happening with your home situation, and maybe even encourage you with running too.
Okay, great. We've presented ways of how we can regulate ourselves, and then gone on to unpack how we can listen and relate to each other more helpfully. So by this point, we should now be in a more normal functioning position and able to reason. We should feel more like our old selves. But that said, let's not forget we are still in an unprecedented situation caused by the coronavirus pandemic.
We developed Maslow's hierarchy of needs so that we can keep the focus on you as school staff, parents and carers as you transition. We want to acknowledge that this is inevitably going to provoke fear and anxiety. Our safety is not guaranteed. It's never a certainty. But that bottom segment, are you safe and well nourished, both physically and emotionally, is much more fragile than usual. It's more important than ever to find ways to help yourself to manage your anxiety and keep yourself inside the window of tolerance so that you're able to regulate, relate and reason. Our children do not need a perfect robot. They need us to show up in all of our humanness. We are good enough. Actually, we're probably overqualified, but let's start the day off humble.
Mental health and well-being are at the heart of how the Educational Psychology Service provides support for schools. So please do get in touch if you need to. And look out for an online presentation from our colleagues about whole school recovery, which is focused on children and young people. It's coming soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.